Hello, my name is Pablo Arias with International Relocation Partner. We are a company that does international moving for expats who are looking to move abroad from United States and Canada to places like Costa Rica or Nicaragua or Panama. And we actually have a small little office in San Juan del Sur. And I met and I want to introduce Scott. It's called Adam Miller. I met him through his YouTube channel, and he's actually an influencer and one of the only very few influencers in YouTube that talks about Nicaragua and showcase Nicaragua many different places. And I do believe we have conflicted information. We may have to debate this here. Uh, and we wanted to talk about San Juan del Sur and why San Juan del Sur may not be the best option for you to move when you're thinking moving into Nicaragua. And I was talking to Scott, I was chatting, and he was telling me, lots of people is missing out a lot of beautiful pet places just because they are focusing on whatever whoever else is selling. Because there's a lot of people in real estate that is selling San Juan del Sur, but we know, and I've been into many different places in Nicaragua. By the way, I'm not from Nicaragua. I'm actually in Costa Rica. We own a company that has operations and offices in Nicaragua, and we have this debate. San Sur is perfect, isn't it, or not, or maybe not. Scott, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. All right. So I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is my vlog. It's just the Scott Allen Miller vlog. Like, it's not very fancy. I kind of started off, I moved to Nicaragua 7 years ago, then moved back to Europe, and then I've been back for the last couple of years. And since I came back, I started a vlog that I really kind of just expected to be making videos for my family to kind of keep them up to date with what I was doing because I was living outside the country. And it kind of became organically this vlog about life in Central America and Nicaragua specifically. And it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So that's sort of just naturally became something that I do. But I'm a technology and business consultant out of the United States. That's what I actually do day to day. But vlogging is a really big hobby of mine that kind of just turned into something that has kind of become popular here in Nicaragua because there really isn't a lot of that kind of stuff. So, and I live, I should point out, because we're talking about San Juan del Sur, I am based up in the Northwest in the city of León, which is the second largest city in the country. And it's pretty well known on like the tourist circuit. Like, people know the name, but it doesn't get a lot of tourists. It's on the circuit, but not popular on the circuit. So we're a very different part of the country, even though we're still Pacific Coast.
Initially, I know you have lived in many different places, which is this is huge. This is pretty good material. Living in Europe, of course, from the U.S. and traveling and having business and operations in different countries. But out of all of the locations you could possibly pick, why Nicaragua?
Okay, so that's a great question, and a lot of, so I'll start with what is my favorite country, because that's important. And my favorite country to live in, I'm not going to pick favorites as a country. My favorite place to live, if nothing else mattered, is actually Spain. Love Spain, it's fantastic, and I have lived there. But I lived in Nicaragua previously, while making kind of a world trek in different countries. And the things that made Nicaragua stand out as the real practical choice. First of all, I do love Nicaragua. Like, I love the food, the people, like the way that the weather is, the lifestyle, that stuff's all great. And you can say that about almost any country. Every country has great people and great food. Like, that's silly. But um, different people connect with different lifestyles, and I connect very well with Nicaragua. But very importantly for me and my family, which is important, right? I have a wife, I have young daughters, I have animals, dogs, and we relocated all of them to Nicaragua, right? So this is not just me being a retired guy living on the beach, which is what a lot of people picture. I am raising a family, putting my kids through school and all that here in Nicaragua. For me, I have a business in the United States. Most of our customers are in the United States, but a lot of our staff is throughout Latin America, Mexico, Bolivia, here in Nicaragua. And for us, there's some really important aspects about Nicaragua that really hit home for us. Our family in the United States, almost entirely in Texas, in Houston, Texas. A flight from Nicaragua to Houston, Texas is 2.5 hours and very little money. It's very easy. And if we don't have a flight available from here, a flight from Liberia, Costa Rica is about the same and not very hard to do. So we have real good options to get back home when we need to, or if we want to, Christmas, right? We like to visit. And time zone, we're in the same time zone that we were back home. We're in the Texas time zone, or central. And so when we're doing things like doing business with customers in the US, they understand, oh, you're central time? they get it, right? No one is confused by Chicago time. It just makes life really easy doing business back to the US. And the other really big killer feature of Nicaragua is that the infrastructure here is fantastic. It's not just the best in Central America, it's one of the best in the Western Hemisphere. We have some of the fastest, cheapest internet, some of the most reliable fiber available everywhere. We have decent power supply, not great, but the US is not great either these days. So it's comparable. It's very different in the way that you get outages, but our outages are actually smaller but more frequent. So it's a kind of a, but it's easy to hedge against that with battery backups and small generators if you need to. Whereas in the US, a 2-week outage that happens infrequently generally is crippling. So we find that an advantage for the way that we work. And then, of course, like roads and weather here are pretty reliable. You're not going to get the huge storms. Even though we just had a hurricane, how much did it affect us? 1 night and 90 minutes of no power. Why did we lose power for 90 minutes? Locals said it was the worst they had ever seen. It's because the local church had the tree came right down on our power lines. That was it. They had it fixed in 90 minutes. Completely different world than the US. So for us doing business to the US, Nicaragua is the best possible location. And from a, just feeling like we're in the US or feeling connected to family, they can visit us, we can visit them, so easy. And of course, everyone will point out Nicaragua is nice and warm, tropical, beautiful beaches, great beer, and the cost of living is very low. That's true of a lot of countries in the area, so that's not necessarily a unique feature, but they're important as just in the general picture, there's some big advantages to the area.
Okay, and let's talk about San Juan del Sur. Let's talk about San Juan del Sur. It's a nice place. It's a nice small little town. It feels like with a lot of options for tourists to come, maybe fish, maybe do some tours, maybe rent a four-wheeler, so there's some options. There's also some resorts. It's an interesting community. We noticed, and we have a little office in San Juan del Sur as the result of most of our customers move to San Juan, and we feel it's practical for us to be there, maybe also to advertise so the community knows about our business. We help people move from the States to San Juan del Sur, and people even from South Africa. We've been getting customers from South Africa moving into Nicaragua, things like that. And San Juan del Sur is like a little hub where people get together for maybe dining or some activities. But you mentioned maybe it's not the best option.
So San Juan del Sur is special, right? And in my video, The Two Nicaraguas, we talk about it a bit, that Nicaragua, because of its nature, tends to have this kind of dichotomy of expats who live here. And this is natural anywhere. You've lived in Panama, you're familiar with, there are some really hardcore isolated enclaves where you can go in Panama. The cost is triple the rest of Panama, and everyone speaks English, and every restaurant you want to go to is just like you were in the US or Canada. Mm-hmm. Nicaragua has the same effect on a smaller scale, but that kind of thing happens. And especially on the southwestern coast, you have lots of regions that are either resorts or resort style living. They are almost entirely expats. They don't cater, they don't advertise to Nicaraguans at all. And they just focus on expats who are moving in because in a country that is this small, even though we're larger than a Costa Rica or a Panama, we're not that much larger, right? We're only 1 million people larger than Costa Rica. We're only twice the size of Panama. So we're not huge. When you get these large communities of expats, they naturally form kind of their own little bubbles. And mostly along the coast, they are very, very tiny bubbles just along the beaches. They don't go inland. They don't go anywhere. In San Juan del Sur, and it happened there both because it is a beautiful protected bay and because historically this was the portage for the American shipping companies in the 1800s. So Vanderbilt and all of his ships would go across there to go back up for the gold rush in the 1840s. So there was a huge movement of expats into San Juan del Sur 160 years ago, and that has remained, right? So that has always been a bubble. And then Granada, because it is the tourist hub of the country with all the colonial structure and the history and it's near the airport, also has a completely different vibe, but a small expat hub. Those locations, everybody looking at Nicaragua, whether tourist or expat, is going to be drawn to those locations because all the resources are there. The other people have gone there. You have resources, right? You have expat resources of, I can go hang out with other expats. So in San Juan del Sur, especially because it's a small community, has become an expat enclave. And you're either an expat living in San Juan del Sur or you are a Nicaraguan servicing expats in San Juan del Sur. Those are really the only two groups that are there. There really isn't anything else. And so what has happened, and this is not necessarily bad, for some of our viewers, this may be really good. So it's important to put it in that context. But it's become a completely inclusive community that is separate from the rest of Nicaragua. Nicaraguans, the Nicaraguense, don't really think of San Juan del Sur as one of their villages, and those who live in San Juan del Sur don't think of themselves as part of the rest of Nicaragua. They would travel out to Nicaragua to go visit it and then return home. Much like in Panama, when you go west of the canal, people refer to going back to Panama when they're going back to the city, even though they're right in the middle of the country. And so that overall effect comes in. And what that does for people who are looking to move there, of course, there's a cost factor, but that could just make sense, right? If you want that beautiful bay, that protected harbor, you want to have your own large fishing boat that can sit out there and you can see it in the sunset, there's nowhere else you're going to go. San Juan del Sur is your place, absolutely. But you're going to pay a massive premium, both for land, for construction, pre-built houses, all of that is going to be a premium. Not because someone's ripping you off, but because it is a premium, right? You may also get ripped off, that's a separate thing, but the actual prices, the value is higher in San Juan del Sur than the rest of the country, than Managua, than Granada, right? It just is. So your everything's escalated, and your cost of a restaurant is 2 or 3 times that same food elsewhere in the country. You pay for luxury, you pay for special benefits. If those benefits are worth it to you, if you want to be around other expats primarily, then nothing's going to be the same. Maybe some Granada, if you want city life, you could do it. But San Juan del Sur is going to be unique for Nicaragua. It's just not that big of a country, so it's the only place like that. But if that's not what you're looking for, if you're looking to see that your dollar goes farther, if you really want to get away from the places you left, right? If your desire is to come from the US or Canada and go to another group of US or Canada just with better weather, lower cost, whatever, San Juan del Sur is going to be perfect. But if you're coming from the US or Canada and you kind of want to get away and you're like, but I love Nicaragua, I want to be part of Nicaragua, then San Juan del Sur is going to isolate you from Nicaragua. You're going to often not even be aware of what's going on in Nicaragua very much. You're going to be completely disconnected from it. And living outside of San Juan del Sur, you have the options of fractional cost of living. You have the ability to get out and participate with Nicaraguense in their activities, their lifestyles, and live a completely different existence than you may even be expecting. Right. So in one case, you're kind of taking the Nicaragua and saying, I want to go to the Nicaragua that's adapting to me. And then in the other case, you're adapting to Nicaragua. And it really comes down to what makes sense for you. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. They are two very different ways to approach relocating to a country like this.
I have 2 questions. Now that we have this topic, I have 2 questions. First is, do you feel this dynamic of this expat bubble in San Juan del Sur is affecting the local economy of the rest of the country, or even the local economy for the families that live in San Juan del Sur?
I think it probably does affect the families that live in San Juan del Sur dramatically so, because there is so many jobs when times are good and such a lack of jobs when times are bad. So right now, like during COVID, San Juan del Sur was hit so much harder than the rest of the country. Where in the rest of the country, we saw houses drop by 50% to 75% in value. In San Juan del Sur, we're seeing them drop 60 to 90% in value, right? Personal incomes are getting decimated in San Juan. The rest of the country, sure, it got hit. COVID was hard for everybody everywhere. But for the most part, most of Nicaragua is actually pretty insulated. But San Juan del Sur was destroyed. And when you go there, you feel it. If you were there in even 2019, when it was not at its peak, but especially 2017, when it was at its peak, my gosh, that you couldn't move through the streets. There were so many revelers out partying. It was an absolute bacchanal all the time, right? Wine flowing in the streets. Today, you go down there and it is quiet. It is empty. They're on the streets begging you to come into empty restaurants. Instead of trying to get a seat, they're trying to get a body in a seat. Everything has changed. Most of the businesses have closed. A few new ones have taken advantage where they had some investment dollars. Tuanis, for example, came in when things were cheap, and they took advantage of the situation because they knew they were going to ride it out. And their name is Tuanis. which is a Nicaraguan word that is not going to appeal to foreigners. They're the first. When the foreigners went away, the up and coming middle class of Nicaragua started moving in. We're seeing some changes in San Juan del Sur because of that. And they're starting to advertise to locals, come buy up the pennies on the dollar real estate, because the foreigners are gone and they're not coming back anytime soon. So they want to get out, and Nicaragua has some of the money to do that. Not a lot, but it has some, and some of the investors are coming in from the interior. I think the other part of the question is, does San Juan del Sur really affect the economy of the rest of the country? I think the answer is no. By and large, there is very little, and there's reasons for this, right? Mostly geographical. San Juan del Sur is so isolated that it is practically a part of Costa Rica, not a part of Nicaragua. It sits closer to the Costa Rican border than it does to any major population center in Nicaragua. It has no interactions with anybody, right? It has Rivas as its neighboring city. They get a little bit there, but most people in San Juan del Sur don't think of Rivas as a resource to use. Ometepe is hours away by ferry. They share a little bit with San Juan del Sur, but they're pretty isolated from the rest of the country too. They're an island, right? But when it comes to Granada and Managua and Matagalpa and León, to us, San Juan del Sur is a foreign destination that we might take a weekend trip to.
The second question I have, and I think you have a lot to bring to this, is, let's say San Juan del Sur is not our place because we want something different. I'm an expat. I want to live abroad. I want to be out. Probably I'm from New York or a big city, and why am I going to go into another big expat bubble or American or Canadian bubble? What other places would you advise for people to take a look? They obviously probably Granada or Leon, but just give us a few ideas so people after this video can go and start researching, maybe taking a look of your YouTube channel and get to learn more about options. What other options Nicaragua has to offer, which I know there's a lot of options.
Yeah, Nicaragua really does have a lot of options. That's one of the great things about it. Although populated Nicaragua, for those who are looking at a map, I love making this comparison. If you look in the early 1800s, the zone known as Nicaragua, the portion occupied by the Nicaraguense, is barely larger and about the same shape as El Salvador. Everything to the east is actually the Mosquito Coast. It's an autonomous region, and the culture is different, and it's mostly empty. So when we're talking, you're actually talking a relatively small zone, still pretty big compared to Panama, but not a giant area. So you've got a lot of choices. Granada, more or less, you're going to write it off because it's a small city and it's expensive, and it is primarily catering to the expats and tourists. It's a great city for tourism, but for living, it is expensive and it doesn't offer a lot of that Nicaraguan feel. Some people love it, but mostly because of the enclave. And so if we're ruling out the enclave, which is why we ruled out San Juan del Sur in this question, we're going to rule out Granada with it. If we're not ruling out San Juan del Sur, then Granada is a great choice, just to be clear. Of the non-expat places, you just want to experience Nicaragua. You could care less whether you run into other tourists, other expats, anybody else or not. León is a great choice, and its sister city, Chinandega. These are the hot cities. They are big and hot, really hot consistently. They don't have such a thing as cool days. They have really hot days and sort of hot days. That's it. You compare them to Panama City and Merida, with Chinandega being the hottest of those four, right? The hottest in Latin America. León ties for number 2. So this is hot. But they're both good cities. Chinandega is a more industrial, modern city, a little bit smaller, very few expats, like 0. León is a giant city, second largest in the country. It is the university center. If you want a vibrant, like art scene, poets and educators and youth activities, stuff going on, really, really lively with clubs going all night, León is your city. It is also the only major city that has the beach within its city zone. Every other beach in Nicaragua is a long distance from its sponsoring city, Managua or whatever, hours away. León actually has 2 beaches inside the metro area, still 17 minutes away, but 17 minutes, not hours. There are local buses go. You don't have to have a car. You don't have to do some arrangement for transportation. That makes it unique in the entire country from that perspective. It is the only shared beach city area. The capital at Managua and its sibling city of Masaya make for a really good area, and people overlook this all the time. Managua is just written off across the board because, and I'm going to say it, it's an ugly city. But it's not ugly because it's a terrible place. It is ugly because it was devastated by an earthquake and they decided they could not risk building up again. So it is a sprawling village of epic proportions. But it has really cool communities to live in. It has really neat little communities full of restaurants and nightclubs and shopping and a neat culture that you really don't find anywhere else, not even in a Tegucigalpa or Guate or Panama City. Managua has a different vibe, not for everyone, right? I'm a city guy. I love Guatemala City. I love a San Jose. I love a Panama City. Those big inner city feelings, like that super urban experience, is lacking in Managua. Managua has this giant urbane village feel that is honestly unique. I've never experienced it anywhere else. A lot of people hate it, but a lot of people hate it because they see it out of the window of a taxi and never take a moment to get to know it. For those of us who spent time in Managua, we actually look forward to it. I like to go to Managua on the weekends to go party. It's only 90 minutes from here. I'll go meet up with friends in the suburbs, crack a beer, go in, find an amazing restaurant, some of the best in the region at really good prices, and just hang out, go dancing or whatever. It is a really fun town. Go to concerts, all that kind of stuff. There's always something going on in Nicaragua, often small scale, always something to do. So the capital region is better than you think, and Masaya is a separate city. So you don't have that, oh, it's Managua vibe, but you're only 10 minutes away. South of the capital region is actually a pretty cool zone. With Hinotepe, Hiriambra, and the White Villages, or the Witch Villages. It's a much smaller area. None of them are big cities, but it does have universities and some really cool culture. And if you're looking for something that's kind of in the middle of the country and you still want access to the San Juan del Sur zone, they fit that pretty well. They're just easily accessible to everything, but you can still get to Managua within the hour. So they're a nice choice. The other big region, and this is the piece de resistance that everyone overlooks, is the highlands. In the north central region of Nicaragua is the highest mountains in the country and 3 powerhouse cities that are all reachable from each other and each surrounded by large villages everywhere. When you're out in León and Chinandega, there's some satellite cities, there's a few villages around, but you're essentially in an empty zone. You drive through open countryside between cities. When you're in Managua, you're in a sprawling city until you hit mountains and forests. When you're in the middle of the country, it's just flat with little towns here and there. When you get up to the mountains, nothing is as big as in the south, except the departments themselves are enormous. You never stop. It's just one village after another, loosely connected. So Matagalpa in the south, Esteli in the west, and Jinotega in the north represent the 3 cities and 3 departments of that region. And together they have a giant population of millions. It's like half the country lives in the highlands. They have the weather that no one realizes is here in Nicaragua. Don't get me wrong, still warm. It's Nicaragua, it's never cold. But they drop by many degrees. Going from León to Managua, we drop by like 10 degrees. Managua to Matagalpa, we drop by another 10 degrees. And Matagalpa to Jinotega, another 5. Right? So you go from, I can never wear jeans, to I never have to put on shorts again, just in that amount of time. All of them have good nightlife. All of them have great restaurants. All of them have different culture. You don't mistake those cities for each other, but they're in the mountains. So you get that different terrain that we don't get down here. Down here, everything's generally flat, but it's a lot more interesting up there. And the culture changes. You feel in that region a connection to the Northern Triangle. That's Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. You feel that Mayan influence from the north because those are the trading cities historically that traded with the Mayans. And so that influence came down. Whereas León, Managua, Granada, and South are pure Nicaraguense, which is the same cultural zone as Costa Rica. And you have that continuous cultural zone. But that mountain region is the transition zone between those 2 regions. And you do feel it. So you get different stores, you get different businesses, you get different artists.
And to the entire point, of people moving abroad is not for everybody, but a lot of people who are looking to move abroad is to have a better lifestyle and to make more with their money. And obviously, San Juan del Sur is a lot more expensive. But if you go to some of these areas, Esteli, Jinotega, and I not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I moved one of my customers. I moved her from Virginia to Costa Rica. She spent 4 years here, and then she started looking at Nicaragua, and she bought this like huge 20 acres. Like it was huge. We had a little town within the property she purchased and a huge lake for $150,000.
Wow.
150, 20 acres, a lake, and she was the owner of the little town, of course. But it was private, but it was within her property for $150,000. This was before COVID, a couple of years ago. Uh, but that I don't think you can do anything like that in San Juan del Sur. One single apartment could cost you $150,000.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's a different world, very different world.
so there are many advantages of
Yeah, and
exploring the rest of the country.
and all of Nicaragua is surprisingly safe. We're one of the safest countries in the region, and by far compared to the Northern Triangle, right? It's Nicaragua competes with the U.S. and Canada for safety, and for a while we were ahead of Canada as the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. So Nicaragua is a very safe country overall. But if you are going to run into crime, the Mosquito Coast, Managua, and San Juan del Sur all stand out as much more dangerous than the rest of the country. Places like Leon, Chinandega, and the Highland regions are some of the safest regions. And when you the farther you get away from expats, the fewer opportunities there are for an income disparity-based crime situation. Right? You start becoming one of the locals. You no longer stand out. But when you're in someplace like San Juan del Sur or Managua or Granada, then there are large numbers of expats, and there's a certain criminal element anywhere in the world that when you have a low-income area and a very obvious group of high-income people, that they become obvious targets. And I can tell you, I lived in Granada, and every day it was people would see you on the street and they would come after you, not with knives and things. They would just come after you to sell you something, come after you to ask you something, come after you to beg you for something. If you walked home with leftover food, people would swarm trying to get your leftovers. Right? And that's a very different world than here in Leon. And we're still a tourist city, right? But that almost never happens. A little bit. If you're sitting at a table in a restaurant, once in a while, someone's going to call in because they see that you're not Nicaraguan, and they'll be like, "Hey, I need some money," and you're like, "I'm in the middle of a restaurant. Why'd you pick me out as the only person?" Right? And you weren't begging a minute ago. You were just on the street, but now you're like, it gets weird. But it's very, very little. But Granada, San Juan del Sur, it's part of the everyday. And that stuff contributes or is a mirror of a certain type of non-violent crime, of certain opportunistic crime. But when you're up in Matagalpa, for example, you accidentally overpay at a restaurant, there's a really good chance they're going to come chase you outside the door and be like, "Oh, you gave me $10 too much." But you do that in San Juan del Sur, that money's gone, right? They're not stealing from you per se.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is something else that I feel, by talking to you for a little bit before the interview is start. We have as a business people, by owning businesses, and I also travel. I lived in the U.S., I lived in Panama, I'm living in Costa Rica. I traveled the entire Central America region. I have traveled Europe, and the business mentality you and I have is interesting. It's different for a small business company that I have or that we operate. We
Mhm.
have a different set of ideas about how to operate in a small business that is very different from most other small businesses in Costa Rica. Uh, I like to do business now that we live in the digital age. I like to do business online. I like to
Mhm.
hire whatever is the best talent that I can possibly find. If this best talent is in, I don't know, Israel or Spain or Chile or Costa Rica or Nicaragua, that's where I will go. And we both have a company that outsource somehow. We outsource our operation to a group or an office in Nicaragua where we have 6 employees. We are in a small company. We are only 11 employees in total in Mexico, Guatemala, and San Juan del Sur. And we like this mentality of trying to find the best talent regardless of your location. Because we live in a digital world, now we can do this. But this is a mentality that a lot of business owners, I think, they are not catching up with this. They don't understand the advantages of. And you as a business owner, do this for your customers and help your customers outsource services in Latin America. I do it because this is the way I find to grow our business, but you do it as a business owner who operates a business in the United States. I want to service and offer better services and better, I'll say, better, I guess, pricing, better connectivity, many benefits. Maybe translate some of the savings for doing it this way to your customers. Can you tell
Mhm.
us more? Can you tell me more why you are doing this? Why you're doing your outsourcing your services? And before we go into that, let's just talk about your business for a little bit.
Okay.
Let's let's share. I want to share your our audience your here.
Yeah,
And
there's
basically
that's
tell us a little bit more about your business and why you outsource a lot of the services that you offer to your customers to Latin America.
yeah, awesome. Okay, so we're NTG. I'll start. We originally were the Niagara Technology Group, and we realized after a number of years that even in the United States, even though Niagara Falls is like one of the most iconic landmarks in the country, an awful lot of Americans had never heard of it or know how to spell it. And so that created a lot of problems. So we actually, after a number of years, rebranded as NTG, and our legal name is NTG. We actually started in the 1990s, so we are not a new company. We started life as an IT outsourcer for small business and quickly fell into doing the very first cloud application for medical research facilities right at the end of 1999. So we were doing cloud applications when no one had the word yet, and absolutely no one was talking about it for medical, let alone most things. So we got into a lot of cool stuff really early, and have been around for a long time. And over the years, we've kind of slowly morphed into a number of things, right? We're a much larger company now. We do entire IT department and IT resource outsourcing. So if you're a company that wants an entire IT department, we provide that, every single aspect of it. And it doesn't matter. We're not a sales company. We don't sell anything. We are just like an internal IT department. We work for our customers, not for vendors that we sell their products. So just like an internal IT department that might have to do customer service and help someone walk through how to use Word or Excel, or that needs to have a CIO sitting at a boardroom explaining to the CEO how their business infrastructure needs to work, we're all the engineering in between, and we handle every technology stack. So it doesn't matter what your business needs, we handle it, which is important because that also means we're not guiding you based on selling our expertise as we do whatever it is you need to do. If you change all your technology tomorrow because the tech changed or business changed directions, it doesn't matter, it's still us. And that's the way an IT department should be. So we provide that. But we also provide, a lot of companies have IT and they just need certain resources. They just need someone to back them up when they're out sick, or to cover for holidays, or to be there if they get hit by a bus, or they have a specific set of skills that they're just missing. They can't afford to bring in specialists for everything. So they hire internally for the things they do every day, and they bring us in for the fill in the gap stuff. We call that augmentation services. We've done those for a really long time. We also build our own software in a number of spaces. We make our own veterinary management software, texting software for businesses. We're working on our own help desk. We work in open source. We do a lot of cool things. And now we also have our own marketing and social media management agency. We have staffing agencies, and we do a lot of work in veterinary and a lot of small things as well. So we cover a lot of bases.
On why, and this is the thing I want people to realize. I understand you own a business in the U.S. Many people do own a business in the U.S. And let's just talk to our audience. Somebody
Mhm.
out here owns a business, an accounting firm, a law firm, a doctor's needs, an assistant, all of that, all of these different things that can be done online. They can be
Mhm.
done from Nicaragua, and this is basically what,
Yeah.
what we're doing. We have a business that I was born in Costa Rica. My company was born, but over a decade ago in Costa Rica, and then at one point I realized maybe I could outsource. And my first person that I hired abroad she was based in Chile.
Mhm.
And that didn't work. I tried something else, because I'm not an expert outsourcing. I just a small business owner with big ideas. So maybe hire somebody that is so good in somewhere else. And then I end up meeting my business partner in Nicaragua, Marjorie Frere, who's very popular within the expat community. A lot of people know her. She managed her logistics or shipping for a lot of expats within Nicaragua. So I met her. I got to know her, and I said, "Wait, would you like to outsource? Offer me the service for my logistics for our international shipping company in Costa Rica." And she started doing that to the point that we are now having an office, 6 employees. And similar to you, you have offices or an operation in Nicaragua and other countries. And what are the benefits for somebody to do this? And why Nicaragua, perhaps, or Bolivia? I do remember you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, so Bolivia is an easy one. So I'm going to start with that. Bolivia is a giant engineering center. Like that is a cultural thing in Bolivia. And traditionally, Bolivia is like the Silicon Valley of China. So we don't think of it. Coming from North America, we often overlook Bolivia because Bolivia specifically doesn't tend to do a lot of business with North America, including Central America. But they do a lot of business in the Southern Cone, Central South America, and Asia. And so they have a lot of that expertise that you don't get in other regions anywhere but Latin America as well. You have the same problem in Europe. You really have to find zones that have certain cultures around the expertise that you need. And so Bolivia is actually really strong for that. And we got lucky. My story is really funny. She's about to be 14-year-old daughter's best friend is from Bolivia, from La Paz, and her father is in IT. They lived near us in Texas, and when we were looking to hire, we were already in Latin America, but we weren't in Bolivia yet. And he's like, "Oh, I've got contacts," and we're like, "What?" And so we moved into Bolivia on a whim, and now it's our main engineering center. But in Latin America in general, we moved into Mexico first a number of years ago. We actually also fell into that. We're lucky enough to be a well-known company. Having us on your resume is pretty much a guaranteed in to any number of companies. And so we had someone who was a senior engineer for the University of Guadalajara came to us and asked to be an intern. We didn't have an opening. He's like, and we're like, you're capped out at the university. He didn't go to the university. He was the head engineer at the university, right? Which is a major university in Mexico. And he's like, yeah, but having NTG on my resume is better than all the work I've done. And so I want to intern there. And so that was our very first experience in working with Mexico. And we really got that experience for a couple of years. He's now our senior vice president. He is the senior most person in the company outside of the direct command chain. And so that he really gave us the confidence in making that move. And then when we started really seeing a growth in the mid 2010s, we were like, okay, we're gonna Latin America seems like it makes sense. We know that the cost of living is lower. We know that the weather is different. We're already remote. In the US, and this is a long story, we started in New York. We eventually moved all of our people to Texas for exactly the same reason. Texas is the United States onshore, offshore. Right? It functions like Latin America. It is half the cost of New York, and it's far away. And it speaks Spanish half the time. So moving our business to Texas in the first place, already to all of our customers, we had already outsourced. We moved there. And then once we did that, we're like, wait a minute, we're already getting on a plane anytime we have to go see a customer. What difference does it make if we're coming from inside the country? We're already far away. We're already being seen as foreign. Well, why not be foreign? And so again, we just took the people that were in Texas and we shifted them south, and again, lowered the cost of living, increased the quality of infrastructure, and added better flexibility as a company. Then we started really seriously hiring within that range. And so we primarily, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Bolivia have been really fantastic for us. We have worked in Panama, which is higher cost, so we tend to shy away from it. Guatemala, we did really well, but it's just worked out that we're not there right now. But throughout the region, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of really good, skilled people. And I think one of my favorite things beyond the obvious, right? Time zones are the same. The internet is fast and stable, faster and more stable than the US. I mentioned this before our call. The time on the internet from this region, we timed from Nicaragua to Dallas or to Miami, is so fast because of the fiber lines the whole way, that if we make a phone call from here, and we're a phone company, that's one of our big things, is we are a full-blown, we build our own phone systems and sell them as a phone company, which if anybody's watching, would love to talk to you about that. That's one of our core businesses.
I have a software that I don't like for phone. The phone system.
Yes,
in the US,
we got to talk because we do the whole thing, and we love to say we don't resell anything. It is our own. We engineer our own solution, and everything's supported out of Latin America. And the software that we work with is actually made in Managua, so completely by coincidence. So because on the telephone you can't tell that you're not in the U.S., you're actually faster than a lot of the U.S. So the sound quality on the phone is flawless. All those things make this region really, really strong technically. And then, of course, the government here in Nicaragua, for example, is very pro-business in the country. They will bend over backwards to make sure that this is a smooth process for you, compared to almost anywhere else, right? They really make it, and people are always like, really? In Nicaragua? Like, yeah, seriously. Like, it is so easy, especially as an outside company. If you're inside the country and you want to open, a business here, yeah, you have all the normal hurdles you have in any country. But if you're an outside country looking to, a company from an outside country looking to do business here, where you're just hiring staff here,
How many
so
people
easy.
you have in Nicaragua?
In Nicaragua, I think at this point we're in the 40 to 50 range.
Wow, good.
Worldwide, we're about 80 to 85.
That's similar to Bolivia, La Paz.
Bolivia is our largest engineering, but not our largest staffing. So they're probably like 15 or 20.
Good.
And then
Good.
Mexico's real small. And then a few people scattered in the US.
See, and this is just a different mindset. It's different business mentality. It's just like the expat. Everybody, I mean, everyone that I talk to, and I move a lot of expats. We as an expats, we tend to have a different set of mentalities. We are always looking for something else. Why am I living in Texas? Why am I living here? Why can I? How can I save money? How can I? And as a business person, it's the same thing. Somebody could take advantage of this globalized economy, the internet, and do save more money and get better quality employees and offer jobs to communities in like in Costa Rica or Nicaragua, and support these communities as well. So I'm really happy to support the community of you know having employees in Nicaragua. I'm really happy to do that and to provide value to our local community. And I'm glad to meet you, and I know that you're doing the same thing. Our time is up. It's been 40 minutes. It's a lot of information, but I know our users are gonna learn a lot. Uh, Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.